It began as an innocent business trip. In the autumn of 1928, London was drenched in rain, and Margaret Lane, a young clerk for the British Embassy, was sent to Paris on short notice. Her train arrived late into the night, and all she wanted was a warm bath and a clean bed. A porter at the Gare du Nord recommended the Hotel du Montclair, a quiet, respectable establishment overlooking the Seine. When Margaret arrived, the brass chandeliers shimmered dimly against the marble floor, and the scent of lavender polish filled the air. The manager, a pale man in a waistcoat, greeted her with formal politeness and handed over the brass key to room 342. "Third floor, madam. Breakfast from 7. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that seemed to hide something. Margaret thanked him and made her way up the carpeted stairs, unaware that this simple act, walking toward room 342, would become the last traceable moment of her existence. The next morning, the hotel lobby was filled with confusion. Margaret Lane's traveling companion, Miss Weatherly, had gone down to breakfast alone, expecting her friend to follow. But as minutes turned into hours, she began to worry. The clerk checked the guest book. No one named Lane had checked in the previous night. Bewildered, Miss Weatherly insisted that she had watched her friend receive the key from the manager himself. The hotel staff exchanged uneasy glances. The key rack showed no room 342 at all. When Miss Weatherly ran up the staircase, she found that the corridor where room 342 should have been ended abruptly in a wall. The wallpaper looked freshly redone, sealing away any trace of a door. She began to scream, insisting she had seen the number 342 only hours before. Other guests came to watch, whispering nervously as the manager arrived, his face unreadable. "Madam," he said softly, "there has never been a room 342 in this hotel." The police were called. Inspectors searched every floor, including the attic and basement, but found no evidence of a missing guest or a hidden room. Margaret's luggage, her trunk and a small valise, had vanished from the storeroom. Even more disturbing, the register page that contained her signature was missing as well. Miss Weatherly, now pale and shaking, was escorted to the British Embassy, where her frantic story was met with skepticism. A clerk was dispatched to verify, only to find that Hotel du Montclair did not exist at the address she provided. In its place stood an abandoned building, sealed by iron gates and overgrown ivy. "Impossible!" Miss Weatherly cried. "I was there last night." But the cab driver who had taken them swore he'd dropped them at the Hotel Continental instead. The embassy physician concluded that the woman was suffering from nervous exhaustion brought on by travel stress. Miss Weatherly was sedated and sent home. Her testimony was dismissed as hysteria. Weeks later, when her condition improved, Miss Weatherly returned to Paris determined to prove she wasn't mad. She retraced her steps, the station, the porter, the taxi, but no one remembered her or her friend. When she showed the cab stand attendant a photograph of Margaret, he hesitated. I recall her. But that was years ago, madam." He swore the woman in the photograph had stayed at the Hotel du Montclair long before the Great War, when the building was still open. Confused, Miss Weatherly began researching old property records. She discovered that the hotel had been closed since 1899 after a deadly outbreak of the plague killed nearly all its guests. Room 342, it turned out, had been sealed after the outbreak began, the room where the infection first spread. The government ordered it bricked up permanently. But if the hotel had been closed for nearly 30 years, where had Margaret Lane stayed? The case attracted the attention of French journalist Henri Duval, known for investigating the supernatural. Intrigued by Miss Weatherly's conviction, he traveled to the site himself. The ruins of the old hotel were silent, dust, debris, and faded murals of angels staring down from cracked plaster. But when Duval ventured deeper, he found something that made his skin crawl, a brass room key, green with age, hanging on a nail behind the front desk. Its tag read 342. Duval pocketed it, his heart hammering. That night, he checked into a nearby inn and wrote about his discovery. But when he awoke, the key was gone. In its place lay a faded luggage tag embroidered with the initials M, and the scent of lavender in the air. Days later, Duval fell gravely ill with fever and delirium, muttering about seeing a woman standing in a hotel corridor, her face half hidden, whispering, "You shouldn't have checked in." Henri Duval's notes were recovered from his room weeks after his death. His handwriting grew erratic toward the end, the words slanting across the page as if written in panic. He described hearing bells ringing at night, soft, distant, like an elevator moving through floors that no longer existed. He wrote about shadows gliding beneath door frames, and whispers that seemed to come from within the walls. "The hotel breathes," one entry read. "It remembers every guest who has not yet left." When authorities searched the Montclair ruins again, they found the faint smell of lavender lingering near what was once the third floor. In the debris, a fragment of wallpaper bore the imprint of a brass number, a 3 and a 2. No trace of the missing digit. Locals began calling it La Chambre Fantôme, the Phantom Room. The newspapers mocked Duval's story, calling it a fever dream. But the building's caretaker quietly resigned the same week, claiming he'd seen a woman's reflection in a broken mirror, though the hallway behind him was empty. Decades passed, and the story of Room 342 faded into urban legend. Then, in 1954, a traveling salesman named Edward Ray booked a room at a modest Paris hotel near the river. Late one night, while heading to his room, he noticed a corridor that wasn't on the map at check-in, narrow, candlelit, ending in a single door marked 342. The number sent a chill down his spine. He tried the handle. It opened. Inside was a perfectly preserved 19th century room, brass bed, oil lamp, lace curtains, all untouched by time. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Thinking it a themed suite, Edward unpacked and fell asleep. When he woke the next morning, the furniture was gone. The walls were bare concrete. His suitcase sat in the middle of the room covered in dust. When he ran to the lobby in confusion, the clerk looked baffled. "Monsieur," he said, "there is no third floor in this hotel." Edward checked out immediately, and told no one for years. The legend gained traction again after Edward's death, when his journal was discovered among his belongings. It contained a small hand-drawn sketch of the room, and in the corner of the page, written faintly in pencil, were the initials M.L. Investigators traced the hotel's blueprint. There was no physical space where that corridor could exist. A few paranormal researchers suggested a phenomenon known as time echoes, where locations replay fragments of the past like broken film reels. Others believed the hotel existed simultaneously in two timelines, accessible only to those invited. A retired detective who examined Edward's notes claimed the handwriting on one page didn't match his. It matched Margaret Lane's embassy files. Handwriting experts later confirmed the similarity. "Maybe she never vanished," one researcher said. "Maybe she just checked in somewhere time forgot." In 1971, the French ministry quietly demolished the Montclair ruins, hoping to erase the legend for good. But the demolition crew reported something peculiar. When they tore down the eastern wall, they found a sealed iron door behind layers of brick. It was labeled in faded gold letters, 342. The supervisor refused to open it. He claimed the air around it felt charged, vibrating, and the metal was warm to the touch. One worker swore he heard faint music, an old piano tune drifting from inside. Against orders, a few men pried it open just enough to peek through. One described seeing candlelight and a woman in Victorian dress sitting by the window. When they blinked, the room was empty. The next morning, the sealed door was gone, replaced by solid concrete as if it had never existed. The crew quit the job, and the government declared the site unsafe. In the years that followed, the site was rebuilt into modern apartments. Tenants often complained of strange activity, flickering lights, the smell of lavender, and a bell that chimed at exactly 3:42 a.m. One tenant, a photographer named Elise Fournier, decided to investigate. She set up her camera in the hallway near the eastern stairwell and recorded overnight. In the footage, the wall shimmered faintly around 3:42. A faint brass number, 342, appeared for a moment before vanishing. On the audio, a woman's voice whispered, "Check in, please." When Elise showed the footage to her landlord, he demanded she delete it, saying the building had history, best left undisturbed. A week later she moved out. But her camera, still recording on a timer, captured something else that night. The hallway door creaked open, and a hand placed an old-fashioned brass key on the floor. Elisa's footage circulated quietly among paranormal circles, eventually catching the attention of a small French documentary team in the early 2000s. They decided to film a short segment on the legend of the vanishing room. Using infrared scanners, they mapped the apartment's layout. Everything appeared normal, until 3:42 a.m., when their thermal cameras detected a rectangular void behind the eastern wall, measuring 9 feet by 14. The void pulsed faintly with heat, as though something were breathing inside. One cameraman swore he heard a woman's voice saying, "Don't leave me here." The next frame in the footage froze, distorted with static. When they replayed it later, a single frame showed a woman in an Edwardian dress staring directly into the lens. The project was scrapped before release. The producers went silent, and the footage was quietly purchased by a private collector. Rumors persist that anyone who tries to watch the full recording hears a faint bell, the same tone that rings at 3:42 every night. By 2012, the building stood half empty. Residents whispered about the lavender corridor, a stretch of hallway that sometimes appeared between the third and fourth floors. People claimed to see it after long nights or power outages. A local historian named Jean-Luc Moreau moved in specifically to study the phenomenon. He left motion sensors and microphones throughout the hall. On the fourth night, he was awakened by the sound of dripping water and faint footsteps. When he stepped out, the corridor was longer than before, stretching far into shadow. The walls looked older, lined with peeling gold wallpaper. At the far end, a brass number glinted, 342. He approached slowly. From inside came a sound like a woman humming. Then silence. When he reached for the doorknob, the corridor contracted, the walls folding inward. In an instant he was back where he started. His recordings later showed 30 minutes of distorted static. But one phrase stood out in the waveform, a whisper. "Welcome back." Jean-Luc's last report described seeing an elderly woman watching him from a window across the street, night after night. He wrote that she always stood perfectly still, her hand resting on an old brass key. Then, one morning, she was gone. He tried asking the concierge who lived in that apartment, but the concierge's face went pale. "That flat," he said quietly, "has been vacant since 1928. Disturbed, Jean-Luc decided to leave. But before his departure, he found something slipped under his door, a note, yellowed with age, written in elegant cursive. It read, "Room 342 is ready for you. We've been expecting your return." He moved out the next day, leaving behind all his research. His landlord found his camera weeks later, still running. The final clip showed Jean-Luc entering the elevator. The doors closed. The panel read 3, then 4, then 3 again. It stayed there, flickering. Jean-Luc Moreau was never seen again. In 2019, a team of digital archivists studying lost urban myths revisited the legend. They compiled testimonies spanning nearly a century, from Margaret Lane's disappearance to modern sightings of the lavender corridor. The patterns were uncanny, all occurrences centered on 3:42 a.m., all described the same brass key, the same lavender scent. A retired construction worker came forward claiming that during the 1971 demolition, workers secretly opened the iron door before it was resealed. Inside, he said, they found a room frozen in time, with candles still burning, a breakfast tray untouched, and a woman's dress hanging from the bedpost. The moment their flashlights flickered, everything vanished, leaving bare brick. "We didn't demolish a hotel," he said. "We buried something that wasn't supposed to be here." The footage was allegedly confiscated by city officials. No trace of it remains. Modern tourists still claim to experience odd things near the old Montclair site. Some say their phones glitch at 3:42 a.m., screens filling with static and a faint outline of a brass key. Others hear a woman's voice whispering through earbuds when no audio is playing. A street artist once painted a mural of the vanished hotel facade. By morning, the wall was blank again. The local cafes call it L'heure de El Hotel, the hotel's hour. Urban explorers sometimes report seeing a faint light between two apartment buildings, shaped like a narrow doorway. One blogger who entered described stepping into a hallway that smelled of lavender, hearing an antique clock ticking somewhere in the dark. Then, without warning, the air turned cold, and she woke up outside, her camera gone, her watch frozen at 3:42. When she returned weeks later, there was no alley, no door, just brick, and a brass number nailed to the wall, 342. Late one evening in 2021, a travel vlogger named Sophia Morales decided to document the Montclair mystery for her small but growing YouTube channel. She checked into the modern apartment complex built on the site, explaining to her viewers that the infamous Phantom Room once stood directly below her rented unit. Around 3 a.m., her live stream showed the lights flickering. The connection stuttered, her camera adjusting to a sudden surge of brightness. For a brief moment, the frame showed a hotel corridor, red wallpaper, oil lamps burning, and a brass plaque reading room 342. "You see that?" Sophia whispered. A second later, her stream cut to black. When police entered the apartment the next morning, they found her phone and tripod still recording, facing a blank wall. The timer read 3 hours 42 minutes and 17 seconds. Sophia was gone. Her last recorded whisper, extracted from the audio, was clear. "Someone just checked in." Authorities dismissed the case as a disappearance with technical anomalies. But curious viewers downloaded her footage and enhanced the frames. In one, a faint silhouette stood behind Sophia, a woman in an old-fashioned dress, half visible, her eyes pale as mist. Online forums exploded with theories, dimensional slips, curse time loops, or government experiments. Yet one commenter, claiming to be a former city planner, left something chilling. He said the new building's blueprints still listed one sealed compartment, 9 by 14 feet, marked simply as unassigned space. Its location? The third floor, east wing. Maintenance crews reported strange readings there, temperature drops, pressure fluctuations, and the sound of dripping water behind the walls. When they drilled into the plaster to check the pipes, the drill bit came out covered in ash that smelled faintly of lavender. The space was resealed without explanation. A few months later, a tenant named Gabriel Albert began hearing soft tapping behind his bedroom wall every night at the same time. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 2 more. One night, he recorded it on his phone. Reviewing the audio later, he noticed something he hadn't heard in real time. After the second knock, a faint woman's voice whispered, "Room service." The next morning, he found a brass key on his nightstand. Faded numbers carved into the tag, 342. He threw it into the Seine the same day, terrified. But 2 nights later, it reappeared on his kitchen table, wet and cold. That was the last message from him. When his landlord entered a week later, the apartment was empty, except for a suitcase sitting open on the bed, filled with 1920s-era clothing, each piece neatly folded. On top of them lay a room card embossed with the name, Hotel du Montclair. The Montclair legend is now part of Parisian folklore, but locals still avoid the building. Taxi drivers refuse to stop there after midnight. Construction companies decline renovation contracts. Even delivery apps list the address as restricted zone. In 2023, a paranormal investigator live-streamed from outside the building. As he described the history, a window on the 3rd floor opened by itself. A curtain moved, though the air was still. In the reflection, viewers swore they saw 2 figures standing behind the glass, one holding a key, the other holding a camera. The stream froze for exactly 1 minute and 20 seconds. When it resumed, the window was shut, and the investigator was gone. His channel has been inactive ever since. Police found only his phone at the site. The last photo on it showed an elevator panel with one button illuminated in red. 342. Today, no one knows what became of Margaret Lane, the first recorded guest of room 342. Some believe she slipped through a temporal fold, trapped in a night that repeats endlessly. Others think the room feeds on memory itself, drawing back those who remember its name. But the truth remains hidden behind brick and plaster, sealed beneath layers of paint and denial. Every year, a few curious souls try to locate the room, leaving behind whispers, photos, and the faint scent of lavender. The city denies its existence, The building's owners refuse all interviews, and yet, the stories continue. If you ever find yourself walking the quiet Parisian streets near the river, and hear a faint bell at 3:42 a.m., don't look for the source. Don't follow the scent of lavender. And above all, if you see a brass key lying on the ground, don't pick it up. Some rooms don't let you check out.